Mr. Liu, thank you for the time today. House Speaker John Boehner released a statement responding to the president's proposal, saying that he hasn't made a serious contribution to the work of the super committee today. Critics are calling this a political statement. Why are they wrong?
I think what the president did today, Julianna, is put forward a comprehensive and balanced plan that, combined with what we did together in the summer to reduce discretionary spending, would reduce the deficit by over $4 trillion over the next 10 years. It would put us on a path towards having the deficit be less than 3% of the economy and keeping the debt at a level that is sustainable. That's an incredibly important goal and one that we share. It's built on investing in the American Jobs Act, paying for the American Jobs Act, and making sure that we simultaneously deal with the urgent, immediate need to get the economy moving faster and the not-so-distant need to have our fiscal house in order. We hope that the Speaker and the Congress will look at this plan and will take the view, as we do, that we should engage and put together a balanced plan that doesn't say we're going to take off the table, one thing or another. Their plan takes off the table any kind of taxes, and we think that's not fair.
So is the grand bargain off the table?
I think what the president put forward today is a balanced approach. It's an approach that says we need to cut spending, and we have pages and pages of cuts in health programs and other mandatory spending and revenues to make the tax system more fair.
So he would still be open to the super committee considering changes to Social Security and possibly raising the Medicare eligibility?
I think what the president did in his plan today was put forward his proposal for how to deal with our fiscal challenges. Over the summer, he engaged with the Speaker in bipartisan negotiations and was willing to entertain things that might not be his first choice, but as part of a balanced plan he was willing to talk about. I think that what the president said today very clearly was he is not going to be able to support or sign a bill that will cut Medicare benefits that people rely on if there's no revenues as part of it. And I think we need to have a discussion where we have a balanced approach.
I want to ask you about the Buffett rule. How much do you expect it to contribute to deficit reduction?
So just to be clear, what the president spoke to as the Buffett rule is really a principle that should guide tax reform. The president has said, and we hope Congress really will work on broad-based tax reform to fix a very broken tax code. As part of that, one test is, have we created a system where millionaires and billionaires will pay the same tax rates as the middle-class people working for them? The plan that he sent to Congress today, that we sent to Congress today, has specific proposals for $1.5 trillion of revenues. $800 billion of that comes from not extending the tax cuts for the very wealthy. $700 comes from very specific changes. And the Buffett rule is a principle that we think should guide tax reform, which all of that feeds into.
So it might not bring in new revenue.
Well, clearly there would be revenue. It is not. There are a lot of ways to do it. As Secretary Geithner said when we briefed just a little while ago, there are a number of ways one could accomplish that. Clearly, it would bring in some revenue.
Lisa?
Jack, I wanted to ask you, I saw Martin Feldstein. He was on with us this morning with my colleague Eric Schatzker. He's, of course, a Harvard economics professor. He was talking very specifically about the budget rule or the imposition of taxes or change in taxes for those deemed the wealthiest. And he said a couple things. His back-of-the-envelope calculation suggested that there wouldn't be a huge change in terms of deficit reduction. And he also said that wealthy people, those deemed wealthy, could change their behavior to sort of get around the taxes. So I was hoping you could speak to that and ask you whether or not you factor that into your calculations, or would there be more permanent changes or changes that suppose the wealthy couldn't work around?
Well, Lisa, the real challenge is how to have a system where the very wealthy can't get around these kinds of rules based on where their income is from. Right now, if you're taking all of your income as salary, you're paying an effective marginal tax rate that is appropriate in our current system. If you have unearned income that's most of your great wealth, then you're paying a much lower tax rate. So by going to a place where millionaires and billionaires would be subject to the same kinds of tax rates as people on salary, I think it would eliminate that ability for one kind of income to be favored over another. And I think the test of whether this is right or wrong is only partially on how much revenue it raises. Part of what we have to do when we put a tax code together is have it be fair. And it's just not fair to have people who are earning $50,000 or $100,000 a year paying a higher tax rate than people who are earning $1 million or $1 billion a year. And that's what the president's speaking to.
What about potential knock-on effects, however? For instance, if you change sort of when you're talking about unearned income and someone like Warren Buffett or a hedge fund investor, they're sort of incentivized now to be able to make investments and make investments quickly. Would there be a knock-on effect potentially that could actually hurt the markets, hurt stocks, and in turn hurt companies who then have to cut?
I think that the goal of tax reform is to generally lower tax rates, to normalize the system so there's not all kinds of gaming that wastes a lot of energy in the economy, and to get to a system that's fair, predictable, and balanced. I've yet to meet anyone who would rather not earn more than earn more. I think this notion that we're somehow going to take away that incentive is not reality.
Final question. John Boehner says taxes have to be off the table. The president saying he would veto if it doesn't include if it includes cuts to Medicare but not new taxes. Where do we go from here? Where does the super committee go from here?
I think the super committee has a lot to work with in the plan the president sent forth today. He put forward a plan that has $3 trillion on top of the $1 trillion that we enacted over the summer. Their mark is $1.5 trillion. We certainly hope that they raise their bar and do more, because that's what we need to do for the long-term fiscal health. And the president set forth his definition of what a balanced plan is. I hope the Speaker and the President and all of the Congress and the White House can work together on a balanced plan. That would be the right thing to do for the American people.
Jack Liu, thanks very much. Thanks for the time. Lisa, back.